Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. Today I'm with Danielle Ufland Westfield. Hi Danielle, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, this is the second time we've talked, and the first time you told me this incredible story. But the thing that got me was the sort of career path that you've taken or you had taken in the past. And it's absolutely brilliant. So, kind of like tell us who you are and what that career path was that's kind of led you up to where you are today.
Sure, absolutely. So, number one, my name is Danielle Ufland Westfield. I am currently living in Buffalo, New York. This is where I was born and raised. I started, let's say, my career path, I would say, started right after high school. I grew up with a family that believed in it was about who you knew more than needing to go to the university or college. And they weren't against it, they just didn't push me there. So I started at a small furniture company called Raymore and Flanagan Furniture right out of high school. I worked my way up to the top there. I probably say about took 4 years. I became the office manager running the location with the sales manager. We both ran the stores. Now I can tell you that I was about 19, 20 years old, and I knew really fast. I appreciated the fact that they believed in me and took a chance on me, but I knew very young that I was never going to work more than 36, 37 hours, and I was salary. And
Mhm.
we all know salary means 50, 60 hours, not 37, 40. So I don't like letting people down. So immediately I decided to resign, even though it was the hardest decision I made. I decided to resign because I just wasn't going to give them all that I had at that young of age. I wish I grew up a little smarter, a little wiser, but I was young and out there acting a fool at 20 years old. So that luckily took me to college. Unemployment made me go to college. They didn't make me, but they pushed me towards college.
Yeah.
They told me that I would get paid and I would not have to constantly search for a job if I went to college. So I said, okay, I'll do that. Having no idea what I wanted to be in this world, I decided to go with business administration. So I took business administration. I started at our local community college because again, this was not my path and I had to pay for it. So I went to community college, and once I start something, I cannot stop until I finish. So I finished. I got a bachelor's degree at our Buffalo State College here. I transferred over after getting associates, and now I have a bachelor's degree in business administration. During this time, I am bartending in my free time just to socialize and make money. I love multitasking. It's one of my favorite things. And so I worked at a pretty rough bar. It was in the location where the college was. And I remember my father coming in on a Friday night and being amazed with the crowd that I was responsible for and how well I handled it. And at this moment, he said to me, you need to take the corrections exam. You should be a corrections officer. Now, mind you, my entire family, all the men in my family were corrections officers. My mother's brothers, my father's brothers, my father, everybody was either in the service or corrections officer.
Can I, before you carry on, for people in the UK, a corrections officer is what we would call a prison officer. Yeah.
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry.
So I worked in the state prison, jail, whatever the term is that you use. And so at this time, it was free to take the test. So I started taking some county and state tests and listening a little bit to where my parents wanted me to go. And it actually worked out wonderfully that I graduated from college in August 2004 and I became a New York State Corrections Officer in January 2005. I again had no idea what I was in for. I knew that bartending and that location and in my 20s I was tougher than I could imagine. I also grew up in South Buffalo, which is a neighborhood known for raising strong, independent, feisty women. And so it just seemed like a good fit to me. Everybody would always be so amazed that I was a corrections officer, and I would always say I love bossing men around. So it's the perfect job for me. I worked in a women's prison for 3 weeks when I was in training, and I knew immediately that I was not going to stay at a women's prison. And I went right to a maximum security man's prison. I loved the option of locking them in and having that little bit more security. So we have a maximum or a medium. And so at a maximum, they're locked in their cells, which you would probably call a prison. And in a medium, they're more like in cubicles, which you would probably call a jail. And so I just prefer to lock them in and have that little bit more security. I like the busy life. So at a maximum, you're moving more, you got to lock, unlock, all that stuff. So I liked it. I did it for 6 years before I got hurt on the job.
So
And
before you carry on, when you say they're locked up, how many hours a day do they spend in the cell, roughly?
they're pretty much every time they're back at their home base, they're locked in the cell. But they are going to programs, they are going to, library, to chow. So I couldn't really tell you an exact number. I would say it's not like, so in a maximum security prison, there is a place called the box or shoe. And this is where if their behavior was not right, they only got out 1 hour a day. That is not the case for the entire maximum security prison. That is for special cases. This was, letting them out to go to work, to school, wherever they would go during the day, 3 times a day to eat. So I liked all that movement. So I did that, and I ended up being a law librarian, corrections officer one night, which meant that I had a whole dolly full of milk crates with books to take to the inmates in the hospital that could not get out, because we do supply them with the things that they need. And as I'm dragging that across the prison yard, I slipped on ice and I ended up falling right on my tailbone, hurting my butt
Ooh.
muscle, herniating and bulging a bunch of disc in my neck and back. And at the time, I was 5 months pregnant with my first child. And I only tell you that because that is why my injuries were so stagnant. I was not touched by anybody because I was pregnant. I was my first child. It was my dream to breastfeed. I had no idea what I was doing. Again, this was not something normal in my family, but I felt called to it. It was something as a mother I wanted to do. And with came breastfeeding came another bunch of reasons why doctors would not touch me. You're not getting all that normal care that you would get because you're breast, you're feeding a baby, you can't take medications, you can't do this. So I was being cared for, but I was being cared for probably with a 10% capacity of what they felt comfortable doing with me. So my body healed with all of these injuries. And so
Okay.
it just became stagnant. No matter how much physical therapy I did, no matter how many medications I did, my body would return right back to its original state of these injuries. And so ultimately, the butt muscle ended up making my knee give out when I ran. So, in an emergency in the jail situation, I was no longer valuable to them. So, I lost my career. I was told that because I could not run, I could no longer do the job, and that that was the end for me.
Being
So,
a, sorry, being a
no,
woman in a man's prison, is that not a dangerous kind of scenario, especially for guys that have been locked up for so long?
let's be honest, it's a dangerous situation for anybody. It's a job where you get paid for the what if. Being a woman, I could see, it being more dangerous, but let's be realistic. There's people in prison that want to rape a woman, and there's people in prison that want to rape a man. So we're all, I think, under the same precautions. It's
Mhm.
dangerous just the same to anybody else. I will tell you that a female has I believe, a little bit more of a touch. There are some mama boys out there in the world of criminals, and they seem to want to help and stick up for you. And so I feel that that is easier for a woman to fit in
Okay.
there than it is with your equals. So I had a harder time having men accept me as tough enough to be there than I did as criminals seeing me as a authoritative figure.
Okay. So they had to let you go because of the injuries after 6.5 years or so. What happened next?
Next, I had babies. I was a firm believer. Sorry, I said I like 30 times. I was a firm believer that as long as the state was paying me, that I grew up as a hard worker, and I believed that that meant that I had to do whatever they said. So for 6 years, I was after I not 6 years, I think it was 5 years after I lost the career. I was being seen by every doctor, all different state doctors, my personal doctors, chiropractor, physical therapist, migraine specialist. And what happened is they were continuously poking, prodding, guinea pigging me. I was trying everything I could to come back to my original state, and nothing was working before they ultimately told me that I was done. So I went through a lot of times. I will tell you, from my injuries, not only did my knee give out, but I was receiving about 10 migraines a month. And when I say 10 migraines a month, that means 10 migraines a month plus how many days they lasted. So 90% of the month I had a migraine. I was a functioning migraine because I was a mother, but I barely get out of bed. I can tell you now that I was probably depressed. I When I took the corrections career, it was a 25 years in and out. You
Hmm.
had a pension, retirement, and I was set. And it didn't make sense that I went to college. It didn't the path that I took, but at the time, that was devastating. It took me a while to get over the fact that I had to start over after, I went through that corrections academy while people snuck out in the middle of the night. And I made it. And so it was a hard blow, but I can tell you that the migraines were the worst. I couldn't be who I wanted to be. I was raising children that I couldn't bounce around with. I sometimes couldn't take them where I needed to take them because I was always in bed. So it led me down a path of just misery. I can tell you what happened next was life changing for me. So I waited until my 30s to have babies. I wasn't sure I wanted babies in my 20s, but as
Hmm.
soon as I hit 30, that clock went off, and that's a thing. And I had to have babies. And I can tell you that I had babies, and I never had a typical baby. My first son was diagnosed at 2 years old with high functioning autism. My second son was born, and he also was diagnosed with autism. He had more sensory issues. And then I had a third son, and I will let you know that I was not a healthy pregnant person. So because of I was depressed, because I grew up poor and then middle class, my diet wasn't good. I I was high risk pregnancy, all three pregnancies. So that was
Hmm.
another tough time for me. And then I was having babies diagnosed with autism. Well, my third son, I had gestational diabetes on top of preeclampsia. Found out at 32, 33 weeks that maybe 33, that I had a baby inside me with a heart problem. And so now my third son was coming out, and we already knew that there was some heart issues. So I switched hospitals, and I was preparing myself. And the reason I share this with you is because the depression that I had was tenfold by the time I was done having babies. It seemed like life was just ready to knock me down, one thing
Hmm.
after another. So my son was born, and we were rushed to a hospital that specialized in heart surgeries, and that's about an hour away in Rochester, New York. And I spent 9 days away from my babies because they're all about 20, 22 months apart, caring for my one child that had open heart surgery at 6 days old. And that is my story. So I have children with disabilities. All three of them have something, and life is just not easy. All during this time, I've told you I was having migraines. I barely got out of bed. If you could see pictures from then, I was, I, geez, I was walking around like a Sasquatch, basically. I barely put a bra on. Then came my divorce. I was miserable. I was so upset. I was so angry at the world, and I had to blame somebody. And although my ex-husband did nothing wrong, I had to blame him. And so I blamed him. And now I'm divorced without a job with three babies with special needs. No job, no career, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kept going. I just kept doing what I did. So everybody thought I was crazy. For some reason, I felt drawn to this path of the hard knock life, I guess you would call it. And I pushed on. I started to get on Facebook. I was not on Facebook. I was not on social media because I worked in a prison.
Hmm.
And I decided that I had to make friends. I needed to surround myself with something that was better than what I was doing. So I reached out to a bunch of people that I grew up with. I luckily was very likable, very sociable. And so it just clicked, and I started connecting with all those people again. And one of my girlfriends from high school reached out to me and said, I have this program for you. I really think you should try it. I think that it could help. It really helps with inflammation in the body. I didn't believe her. I didn't even hear inflammation in the body. I heard weight loss. I knew I was single. I knew I had to put myself back out on the market eventually. And I just wasn't happy with myself. And I'm used to digging myself out of holes. So
Mhm.
I agreed to do this program with her. And I went in with the full attention to go hardcore, balls to the wall, I would call it, and then all in. And so I had everything to gain and nothing to lose. And so I did 30 days to healthy living with a company called Arbonne. My girlfriend Melissa led me, and I did everything that she told me to do. And in those 30 days, I started to feel less depressed. I started to feel like more like myself. I had less migraines. I went from 10 a month to 2 that month. I had less. I used to have dead fingers. It was called nerve damage. I would wake up in the morning and I couldn't grab a cup of water until my fingers adjusted. I lost that. That actually was inflammation in my body. That does not happen anymore to me. My knee was no longer giving out on stairs as much as it was previously. And so that's my path. I went with that. I went 6 weeks later, I went to our last family trip to Mexico. I thought it was our last family trip to Mexico. It was planned before the divorce. And I realized that at an all inclusive resort, I was still eating the way that my girlfriend taught me. And in that moment, I realized that I had changed my life forever and that I was my civil service to tell the world that it doesn't have to stop. Life doesn't have to be over. It does seem depressing. It seems daunting. I believe in doctors, but I also believe in the fact that I'm in control of my own life
Mhm.
and I have to make moves that make sense for me. And that is what this did for me. It opened the sky wide open and let me know that food was hurting me more than it was helping me. And I became so passionate and obsessed with what I was eating and how it made me feel that within a year I told my girlfriend, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. Nobody grows up to be the lipstick lady. A lot of MLM haters out there. I was skeptic. I grew up negative and judgmental already, which is why I fit in the prison, but it didn't make sense in this world. There was something here, and I wanted to exploit it and figure it out and share it with everybody that was going through what I went through. And that's what I did. I was so passionate. I coached people like I learned in the Corrections Academy. And I have helped so many others do the same thing, take their autoimmune disorders, take their ailments. And I'm not claiming that Arbonne is the answer to this. I'm just letting you know that the knowledge that I picked up about what food has done to my body is what I now share through this program with others. And now here I am, a health and wellness coach, teaching people how to eat to fuel your body instead of harm it, and know that you have more control than you could ever imagine over what you can do. And I think we always forget that nature is a fucking beautiful thing and that we all come from evolution and it is here to serve you, and that we just have to treat it right and do right by it. And that's what I've been sharing. That is my message now.
You said that you come from this background of sort of strong, independent, feisty women, and you kind of like felt yourself up there. Yeah. Is that mental attitude what pulled you through all of the challenges that you face going through your life today?
I would like to believe that. I don't know. Now that I'm a mother of 3 children and I'm raising them all the same and they're taking different paths, I think it's just something personally inside you that you have or you don't have. And I have always been a fighter. I've always been somebody that's willing to go first and show others the way. And I think that that's truly what what has led me down this path. I mean, I have there's 3 of us, 2 other sisters, and they're all strong and independent, but maybe not on the same path as me and maybe not as much of a fighter. And so I just don't know that that's enough sometimes. I think inside of us has to have that spark. And I will tell you that passion sparks a lot. And so that's what I love sharing. If you're working and you're just not passionate about it, it's time to make a decision about just being passionate about what you do because it never feels like work. I'm so much happier. I just love what I do. I can tell you that today is a day where I have a migraine. I've had a migraine since yesterday, and I'm not going to lie, Paul Wilson, I did not want to do this. But here I am. dressed properly from the top up, pretending I don't have a migraine, fighting through, going right back to bed as soon as we're done. That's not something a lot of people would do. And this is also a struggle that I come across with a lot of people that I coach, because there's always that you don't love yourself enough, you should cancel. And I don't. I care enough about other people, and I know that this small window of time that I would have canceled on you would have changed our relationship. It just would have done so much. You're on a schedule. I'm not going to disrupt your life when I know that after this I can go and tend to myself. And so I struggled with that this morning. I thought about it, but that's not something that your mother can teach you. That's something inside of me that pushes me to just go through what you have to go through. This is part of being successful. It's not beautiful. It's not easy. I can tell you that I think that that's the number one problem with MLMs is, number one, we don't know what we're doing in the beginning. We're grasping at straws. We're trying to climb that ladder. And I can tell you now, after being in this business for 3 years, that it is definitely a serving community, and it's hard not to get it confused with sales. And that is a fine line that a lot of people juggle in this business. And I think my passion has led me down the serving path more than the sales path, which I'm comfortable with both. Believe it or not, I didn't know that about myself. But that's where the bad rap comes from. But I can tell you that this is not easy money. I get to sit home and do what I want, but I'm I'm struggling with tough times like this where I get
Mm.
out of bed when I don't want to. I promise you, if this was a 40 hours and this was the jail, I would not be going to work today. But this is for me, this is for you. And it means more to me than the half hour that I would have laid in bed.
I don't think it's just MLM where people struggle with this. I think all businesses, the first few years, is realizing that it's not the laid back lifestyle that you see in the advertisements of the magazines. It's not about lying by the beach with your laptop out. It's about grafting, making mistakes, working hard, making more mistakes, looking for that spark, like the word you use, looking for that passion in whatever business that you're in, and using that to kind of fuel your forward momentum. Because without that, you're just going to stop and stay in bed and cancel appointments and not do the things that you need to do. And that's probably why so many businesses actually fail in the first 5 years, because people just either don't find the spark, don't find the passion, and just give up because it's too hard.
It's true. And I can tell you that the option to fail is not for me. I can only succeed. I know that I have sent some messages that I'm not proud of. I have done some things in the beginning that I'm not proud of when I was finding my way, but I have grace and I hold grace for that space for people, because it takes a lot of balls to be the unnormal. And I'm okay with not following the rat race. I'm okay with building my own path. And so I push harder for myself than I ever would for anybody else. And I think that that is the misconception of any business. There's always somebody at the top, and the rest of us are fighting to get there. And that is the same for everything in life. And when people come to me and they tell me this is not for me, I'm not salesy, I beg to differ. I mean, I sold myself to my ex-husband. I sold myself to his mother. I sell myself every day to people, hoping that this is the person for me, that you are constantly selling something, even yourself, as you're traveling this earth. So why not have it be something that you're passionate about? And that I did not have to go to college to be a doctor, a nutrition coach. I didn't have to become a personal trainer. And I struggled with all this in the beginning. How can I help people get healthy without these certifications? But I can tell you, here in the US, the standards are not as high as you guys have over there. And so I'm a respectful person. I am not out of line in any way, but I choose my own path and my own beliefs. And that's what I want to go forward sharing with people, is that it doesn't have to look one way for anybody. It can look however it looks for you, whatever feels good to you. And so, yeah, I can open my laptop on the beach and work from anywhere. But again, who wants to work from the beach? A lot of people like to just punch in, punch out, and close their minds down. When you do a personal business, MLM, or something that's growing yourself, there's not as much shutdown, but it is absolutely worth it for the first few years to find your way, grow what you believe in, and I think that the rewards are at the end. You know,
Yeah.
it will definitely pay off. I can tell you that what I've grown, sometimes, I got red light stories, green light stories. Sometimes my ego and my fear sneak in and I wonder, what am I doing? But I also can tell you that I'm a woman that I had to keep this house when I got divorced for my son's autism. I needed this school district that gave us everything that he needed. And I watched a lot of my girlfriends struggle in different parts of town in different schools districts getting the help that their children needed. So I lost my job. I got divorced without a job. I had no idea how income was going to be coming in, but I knew that I had to save this house for my children. And so in the beginning of this journey, I had the passion and the spark, but I also had a mission. And that mission drove me. And now I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm in a place where I comfortably pay the bills with my business. I work the way I want, how I want, some harder than others, but that is success to me. I
Mm,
am not told by anybody what it needs to look like.
absolutely. Um, if you could turn back the clock, Danielle, to any period in your past, A, would you? And B, if the answer is yes, what would you change?
The answer is yes. And I'm going to cry, but I would change my diet for my children. I would eat healthier earlier because mothers can understand that there's a lot of guilt when you have children with disabilities. And because you're the vessel, you blame yourself and you go over and over and over in your head. What did I do? How did I do this? Where did I go wrong? And I didn't know. Like I said, we grew up poor. My father took the corrections job. We became middle class, and we just, when you're poor, you get food. You feed your children. You're happy to just have fed your children. You're not worried about what's in it and how you got it. And that is the one thing I would do different. I would eat differently. I would I would have learned earlier that healthier is self-love. I think we teach each other too much, like, oh, your boyfriend broke up with you, eat a carton of ice cream. It's okay. You deserve it. Why do you deserve that? Why would you want to put on extra weight? Why would you want to give yourself a heart attack? Why would you want diabetes? Why is that rewarding? What do you deserve? I say this all the time. Birthdays are diabetes and heart attacks here in the States. We celebrate with fried foods and cake,
Mm,
and these are all the things that are harming us. And that's how we celebrate life. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so I think that that is why I'm so passionate about what I do, because it's not my fault, but I just wish I knew more. And I wish that we taught more. Doctors are not trained in nutrition. They have their limits. Let's be honest, I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, and the government controls a lot. And I think that money and pharmaceuticals run this world and they create a lot of what we need. But if we could go back to farming our own food and working for ourselves, I think we would be a lot better off. I'm not saying anybody wants that or wishes for that, because I mean, I don't mind having a couple little plant stands, but I'm not trying to have an entire farm with a lot of animals. I got enough on my plate. But I would definitely treat myself better.
okay, cool. Final question. What's the one piece of advice you would offer to anyone that's kind of been through what you've been through, or is thinking about starting some kind of business?
I always had this feeling, this nudge in my life that I was built for more, made for more. And I think a lot of people that do what I do have the same feeling. Don't ignore that. The other great thing about eating healthy is you can tap into your intuition way better. Your brain is clearer, you don't have that brain fog, and you can just go. And I don't care what you believe in. There's any religion, spiritual, whatever your beliefs are, just know and trust in yourself to build your own life. And that is what I've been doing. I just trust my gut. I'm not always sure that it's the right answer. It was Brene Brown that taught me that, success comes with failure
Mm,
and you have to fail. And there was a time in my 20s where I was ashamed of failure. And I am no longer ashamed of failure because it means that I took action. It may have been imperfect action, but it's better than no action.
Absolutely. Action is action every single day. And speaking of action, do you have anything going on at the moment? Courses, trainings, like anything like that at the moment?
Yeah, every month I run a 30 days to healthy living, twice a month. And so I'm always running those. And I just love teaching people how they can love themselves and treat their bodies right through food. And, my program with the company that I'm with just helps it be easier. So I like to call it healthier fast food. I always love when someone questions what's in my products, but flies through McDonald's parking lot without a problem, without a
Yeah, yeah.
flinch. I mean, why is that burger 69 cents? What is that? How do you get all of that greatness for that cheap? And so I just I just I just want people to love themselves, realize that food and nutrition is loving yourself, that is love, and that it all falls into place. You just have to stop living up to society rules and what you thought was the way it's supposed to be. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I got married because it was the next thing to do. I'm not saying that I didn't marry a great man. We have a great relationship. We co parent. He's the perfect father for me and my children. But I only got married because it was the next step. That was the next question. You graduated. You have a career. When will you get married? Where will you have kids? I love nowadays how kids are not doing that. They are living their lives, growing themselves. And I didn't grow up like that. I waited till I was 40 to say, "Ooh, I don't got a lot of time left. Now my slide is down instead of up, and I want to do all those things." And so I think the people doing it in their 20s are on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people get hold of you, Danielle? What's the best place?
I am on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Danielle Ufland Westfield is where you can find me. If you're ever interested in my products or my business, you can go to daniellewestfield.arbonne.com. And that is how you find me. And here at Paul Wilson's podcast, you'll be able to find me and the links to find me further.
Listen, Danielle, it's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
And speak to you again soon.
Yes.